What if the reason you feel like you never really have enough money has absolutely nothing to do with your paycheck?
Right, which is a scary thought.
Yeah, but what if it has everything to do with the fact that you're playing a game where, well, you were intentionally never taught the rules?
It is a really sobering thought. But, when you actually look at how resources flow through society, you realize pretty quickly that the whole public narrative about wealth is, it's almost entirely decoupled from the actual mechanics of wealth creation.
Exactly. Which brings us to our mission for you today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a highly concentrated, frankly, kind of disruptive piece of source material today.
Absolutely disruptive.
It's titled The Silent Blueprint of Wealth. And our goal here is to extract and deeply analyze the three fundamental rules this text lays out. But just to be clear up front, these are not your standard, boilerplate financial tips you'd hear in high school.
No, definitely not.
Right. The source actually explicitly states that wealthy people follow these rules silently, and that they are known by few and followed by even fewer.
Yeah, and that word silently, that is really the anchor here.
How so?
Well, there's this incredibly loud, sort of performative world of consumerism that the vast majority of people inhabit, right?
Oh, for sure. The flashing lights, the new cars.
Exactly. But then on the flip side, there's the quiet, almost clinical execution of these three rules happening entirely in the background. So we aren't here today to just list out the rules for you.
Right. Anyone can just read a list.
Yeah. We need to analyze the psychological friction involved in actually applying them. Because, well, the blueprint demands a fundamental rewiring of how you perceive priority, assets, and honestly, your own lifespan.
Which is wild to think about. But let's just get right into that rewiring, starting with rule 1.
Let's do it.
So the blueprint argues that before you can even think about deploying capital, you have to capture it. And it outlines a very, very rigid sequencing for how money has to be handled. The text literally reads, "Save before you spend, not after, never after."
Yeah. That phrasing is absolute.
It really is.
There's absolutely no gray area there.
I was looking at that exact line when I was prepping for this, the repetition of that phrase, never after. And it's so rigid that it basically assumes the reader has, zero self-control. It feels almost paternalistic in a way.
It does, yeah.
Why is the text so uncompromising here? What is the specific behavioral trap of trying to just, save whatever is left over at the end of the month, like leftovers at a restaurant? If you eat until you're stuffed, there's nothing left to put in the to-go box, right?
It's a great analogy. And, well, it assumes zero self-control. Because behavioral economics proves, time and time again, that relying on self-control for long-term financial planning is just a mathematically flawed strategy.
Oh, really? So willpower just doesn't work?
It really doesn't. It comes down to this concept called present bias, which gets combined with decision fatigue. So think about it. Throughout a given month, you are making thousands of micro decisions.
Constantly.
Right. Buy this coffee, upgrade this subscription, go out to this new dinner spot. And your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles long-term planning, it just gets exhausted.
Oh, I see. So by the time the 30th of the month actually rolls around, the part of your brain that cares about your retirement is basically asleep at the wheel.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's tapped out.
Yeah.
So if you attempt to save after you spend, you're basically forcing an exhausted brain to make a really high-friction choice.
Right.
You're relying on willpower when your willpower is at its absolute lowest point. The text says never after because it recognizes that human willpower is just a highly volatile, highly unreliable resource.
Okay, that makes total sense from a neurological standpoint. But I kind of want to challenge the feasibility of it for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Because telling someone to simply save before they spend, it kind of ignores the reality of stagnant wages and inflation, doesn't it? When someone's margins are incredibly tight, dictating that they must pay themselves first almost sounds, well, like a privilege. How does the blueprint reconcile that?
That is the common pushback, yeah. But the blueprint isn't ignoring the math of poverty or tight margins. It's addressing the psychology of priority.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, when you save after you spend, look at what you're fundamentally doing. You are categorizing your own future as the absolute lowest priority in your entire financial hierarchy.
Oh, wow.
Right. You are telling the universe that your utility company, your landlord, the restaurant you just ordered from, and the streaming service you subscribe to, they all have a higher claim on the fruits of your labor than you do.
Jeez. That completely flips the traditional priority list, doesn't it? You're moving your own survival from the bottom of the pile straight to the top.
You are. You're treating your future self as a VIP creditor.
A VIP creditor, I like that.
And if you automate that transfer before the money even hits your checking account, you bypass that decision fatigue entirely. You force your lifestyle to adapt to the remaining constraints rather than, forcing your savings to adapt to your lifestyle's excess.
Right.
It is an uncomfortable constraint, absolutely, but the text argues it is the literal only way to effectively trap the capital.
Okay, so let's say you've done it. You've hacked your own psychology. You bypassed the decision fatigue. You treated your future self as the primary creditor, and you successfully captured that capital.
You've got the money in the vault.
Exactly. Now what? Because this is where the blueprint indicates people start actively destroying the very thing they just built.
Yeah, this is the crucial transition from capturing wealth to protecting it from cultural conditioning.
Great. Which brings us to rule 2. The text reads, never buy a liability thinking it is an asset. And it gives 2 very specific examples. A car is not an investment, and a house you cannot afford is not either.
Such a brutal reality check.
It is. Now, I don't think we need to spend much time on the car thing. We all know cars depreciate the second you drive them off the lot. That's like personal finance 101.
Sure.
But I have a real issue with how the blueprint categorizes the house. And I suspect a lot of you listening right now will too.
Oh, I'm sure. It's easily the most controversial point in the text for a reason.
Right, because society treats homeownership as the ultimate bedrock of middle-class wealth. I mean, it's the American dream, right? Even if it stretches your budget a bit, aren't you essentially forcing yourself into a savings vehicle?
That's the conventional wisdom, yeah.
Real estate historically appreciates, you're building equity, you're combating inflation. Why is the blueprint just ignoring basic economic history and calling an unaffordable house strict liability? It feels like calling a water reserve a leaky bucket.
Well, it's because the blueprint evaluates assets and liabilities entirely through the lens of cash flow and optionality, not just, your net worth on paper.
Okay, cash flow.
Yeah. You have to look at the actual mechanism of an unaffordable house. Think about it less like a leaky bucket and more like hiring a very, very expensive employee who produces absolutely zero revenue but demands a massive non-negotiable daily salary.
An employee that you're contractually bound to pay for, 30 years?
Exactly, 30 years. So when the text specifies a house you cannot afford, meaning it pushes your debt-to-income ratio to the absolute brink, it stops functioning as an asset and becomes a liquidity trap.
A liquidity trap.
Right. Yes, sure, the property might be appreciating by 3% a year on Zillow, but in the meantime, the property taxes are rising, the roof suddenly needs replacing, the heating system fails in the winter, and the mortgage payments require literally every spare dollar of your income.
So you're trapped. You might be a millionaire on a balance sheet in 20 years, but you are effectively broke on a Tuesday.
That's exactly it. You are cash poor and highly fragile. Because if a macroeconomic shock hits, say, you lose your job or there's a sudden medical emergency, you can't just, slice off a piece of your kitchen island and use it to pay for groceries.
Right, you can't eat the drywall.
Exactly. The equity is trapped. Meanwhile, the house continues to demand capital from you every single month. It actively drains the exact reserves you just built using Rule 1.
Yeah.
The illusion is what the text is really attacking here.
Ah, the illusion. Never buy a liability thinking it is an asset. The self-deception is the real danger.
And that self-deception is fatal because it is so socially reinforced. Think about it. When you buy a massive house that you can barely afford, society literally throws you a party.
Oh yeah, housewarming, gifts, champagne.
Your friends congratulate you. You are given intense social validation for adopting a crushing financial burden. You have effectively handcuffed yourself to a massive monthly burn rate, but because it's culturally defined as a quote-unquote investment, you don't even realize you're wearing handcuffs.
Man, which perfectly explains why the text says these rules are followed silently.
Yes.
The people actually following the blueprint, they look entirely unremarkable to the outside observer. They aren't living in the biggest house they can theoretically get approved for. They're living well within their means, maintaining high cash flow, and completely avoiding the trap of all that social validation.
They are optimizing for resilience, not optics. And they really have to optimize for resilience, because otherwise they run face first into the ultimate consequence outlined in the final rule.
Which brings us perfectly to Rule 3. So we've established capturing a capital by bypassing our present bias. We've established defending that capital by unmasking false assets like the unaffordable house, but then the blueprint delivers this really profound pivot.
It really does.
It reveals that the money we've been agonizing over this whole time isn't actually the primary currency at all.
No, everything we've discussed so far is merely the operational setup for this specific revelation.
Let me just read Rule 3 directly. Time is the only currency that cannot be earned back. They protect it, you sell it, every single day.
It is a brutal assessment of the modern condition.
It really is. I mean, it fundamentally redefines the entire concept of a transaction. The text makes this stark contrast between two groups. They, meaning the wealthy, protect their time. You, the reader, sell it.
Constantly.
But wait, isn't trading our time for money simply what having a job is? Like, is the blueprint basically arguing that standard employment is a scam? How else does society even function if people aren't trading their time for capital?
Right, well, the blueprint isn't calling employment a scam per se. It's calling it a highly asymmetric trade that you should actively be trying to phase out of over time.
Asymmetric how?
To understand why, you really have to look at the intrinsic properties of the two currencies being exchanged here.
Financial capital versus time capital.
Correct. So financial capital is a renewable, highly elastic resource. If you make a terrible investment and you lose $20,000, I mean, it's painful, sure, but the math allows for recovery.
Right, you can earn it back.
Exactly. You can acquire new skills, work longer hours, or shift your capital around, and eventually that $20,000 can be replaced. The resource pool of money is theoretically infinite.
But time. Time is strictly, permanently finite.
It is the ultimate unrenewable resource. Every hour you spend cannot be refunded, recycled, or earned back ever again. It vanishes permanently.
Wow.
So when you are employed, you are trading an unrenewable resource, literal pieces of your actual lifespan, for a renewable resource, which is fiat currency. The wealthy fundamentally understand this asymmetry.
So their goal isn't just making more money.
No, their ultimate goal is not to accumulate a high score in the renewable resource just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Their goal is to accumulate enough of the renewable resource so they could permanently stop selling the unrenewable one.
Oh, I see. So that is the structural link between the three rules. Rule 1 and Rule 2 aren't just about dying with a really big bank account. They are the specific mechanical tools you use to buy back your time in Rule 3.
They are the escape velocity. Let's trace the mechanics of it. If you violate Rule 1, you spend before you save, which leaves you with zero capital.
Right.
Because you have zero capital, you violate Rule 2 and finance a lifestyle you can't afford. Maybe you buy a new car on credit, or you stretch for that massive mortgage. Now you've established a massive monthly overhead. You have effectively created a beast that must be fed every 30 days.
And the only way to feed that beast is to go to the market and sell your time. Every single day. You have structurally mandated your own continuous labor.
That is the trap. You are forced to sell your unrenewable time just to service the debt on your depreciating liabilities. But if you reverse it, if you actually follow the silent blueprint, you save first. You capture the capital. You refuse to buy liabilities disguised as assets, which keeps your monthly overhead remarkably low.
And because your overhead is so low, your saved capital actually has a fighting chance to reach a critical mass.
Exactly. Your capital eventually generates enough yield to cover your baseline living expenses. And the moment the yield from your assets exceeds your low monthly overhead, you experience this fundamental phase shift.
You're free.
Yes. You no longer have to sell your time to survive. You transition from the group who sells it to the group who protects it.
You essentially build a fortress around your calendar. This totally changes how I view absolutely everything. Think about how aggressively we protect our financial currency, right? If you have a bank account, you protect it with biometric scans, complex passwords, two-factor authentication.
Oh, yeah.
You would never just hand a stranger the keys to your financial vault.
Yet we hand out the keys to our calendar with almost zero resistance.
We really do. We leave the vault door to our time just wide open. Like a meeting runs an hour late, we just sit there. Someone wants to pick our brain over a coffee we didn't even want to go to. We say yes.
Yeah.
We allow external forces to constantly withdraw from an account that will never ever see a deposit.
Which is why the final realization of the blueprint is so psychologically heavy. When you buy the liability, like the expensive car or the unaffordable house, you aren't just paying for it with the money you have sitting in the bank today. You are literally paying for it with the future hours, days, and weeks of your life that you will be forced to spend working to pay it off.
Right.
You are mortgaging your lifespan.
That is the ultimate illusion right there. You look at the shiny new car in the driveway and think, oh, I bought this for $60,000. But the blueprint demands you look at it and say, no, I bought this for 3 years of my unrenewable time.
And when you view transactions through that lens, the desire to impress other people with your liabilities tends to vanish very quickly. You realize that social validation is just a terrible exchange rate for your actual lifespan.
It really is. So just synthesizing all of this for you listening, the silent blueprint of wealth isn't a spreadsheet. It's not a budget template. It is a unified philosophy of resource allocation. It demands that you aggressively protect your future self by capturing capital before the friction of daily life can spend it.
Yet,
It requires you to be hypercritical of where you park that capital, completely avoiding the cultural trap of high-maintenance liabilities that masquerade as assets.
and it culminates in the realization that money is merely a tool. The true measure of wealth is having absolute autonomy over your unrenewable time.
This isn't just abstract theory, guys. This changes the calculus of your daily decisions. The next time you consider updating your lifestyle or taking on a new debt, you really have to ask yourself the uncomfortable question. Am I buying an asset, or am I just signing up for a longer shift at the time exchange?
It requires you to act with a level of intentionality that most people will just never understand. That is why it's known by few.
And followed by even fewer. So we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive today.
Okay.
If time truly is the only currency you can never earn back, take a hard, critical look at your calendar for tomorrow morning. Look at the obligations you've accepted, the meetings you're attending, the random tasks you've agreed to do. Are you actively, silently protecting your ultimate wealth, or are you just setting up another fire sale?